James, I got to start with you because there's a piece on our website in which the headline is, James Moore, leaders' debates have come to mean less and less. Why do you think that? And do you think this one will be any different?
Well, first of all this talk about playoff hockey as a Canucks fan is nothing short of an attack. But I'm glad I'm glad we're able to accommodate for some of you. No, but look, leaders' debates. Leaders' debates can matter. For sure, they can matter. You showed a couple clips that did have some consequence. But look, leaders' debates are the Hollywood moment of an election campaign. It's a clash. I think we overemphasize them relative to their importance. 19 times out of 20, they don't actually result in much. You see in leaders' debates what you saw throughout the campaign. It's just they happen to be standing in the same room together. And also, I think leaders' debates are, again, a good communications moment where you can perhaps sort of land a good shot on your opponent. But to be an effective prime minister of this country, all the skills that make you an effective debater have nothing to do with being an effective prime minister. To be a good debater, you have to be quick on your feet, quick with the comeback, quick with the punch, make a quick decision. Being an effective prime minister is about being deliberative. It's about consulting. It's about being thoughtful. It's about measuring twice and cutting once and doing your homework and being dispassionate and thoughtful. It's not about being quick and snappy. So it'll be good TV, possibly. Will it be of consequence? Possibly, but historically that has not been the case. But there could be a moment here, again, where I said in the last segment, where Pierre Poilievre could present himself to Canadians in a way that they haven't seen, where they can see in a relatively young man who's 45, Mark Carney is 60, somebody who has been in politics for a long time, but has emerged and has matured and has clearly built a movement. And maybe a lot of Canadians might say, why is it that almost 4 out of 10 Canadians think that this guy should be prime minister? And they'll give him a moment and they'll give him a look. And after giving him a look, they might say, as they did to Justin Trudeau in 2015, you know what? I think this guy's worth a chance, and I think we're worth having a guy like him as prime minister. So there's a door that's open that he could walk through, we'll have to see.
I feel like insofar as I understand James' point about the moments and the overhype, the one thing that this does offer Canadians at a particularly timing-wise significant point in the campaign, Brian, just ahead of a long weekend where they're going to talk with their families, is 2 hours to look at the two people who want to be prime minister. And we really haven't had any kind of, they haven't done many long-form one-on-one interviews. There just hasn't been that kind of opportunity throughout the campaign so far. The numbers were good for the last 2 debates. More people, I think, in the 2021 debate watched that debate in Canada than even watched the Super Bowl that year. So there is opportunity. I don't know if they make good on it, but there's opportunity there.
Well, first off, I absolutely don't know why, but I just love the fact that the debate got changed, the timing of it. I think that's just so quintessential Canadian. So it's just that's awesome. That's number one. Number two, I agree with James in theory in the sense that debates themselves don't necessarily have a huge impact all of the time, and maybe often they don't. But as you mentioned, sometimes they do. And nowadays, it's probably less about the moment in the debate itself or the sort of performance in the debate, but it's really the one moment, 10 seconds that will get headlines and sort of potentially go viral the next day. Times have sort of changed. Now, other factors that I think have changed a little bit. This is an election, polling would show, that Canadians feel is actually important. Every election, everyone tries to say this is one of the most important elections for our jurisdiction, federally or provincially. But in this case, Canadians actually believe that. So that will lend itself to having more people participate. There are less to watch it. There are less debates. So that could also have maybe an impact in the sense that, well, there's only a couple, so I'm going to tune in. I also think that given what has happened to Carney and the Liberals and sort of his ascent, that, and look, obviously it's because of his economic sort of experience, and I think people see that maybe his credentials are right for the moment, but he's still unknown to some degree. So I do think there's a lot of people that still want to sort of see him, get to know him. So this would be an opportunity for that. There's the questions about his French, so that could obviously increase the eyeballs on the French debate. So I do think there's actually quite a bit kind of lining up that these debates will matter. And to your point, I do think that after this week, based on the fact that it's the debate week and we have a long weekend where a lot of family and friends are going to get together, or even just people get to have a pause and to think about the election, they'll probably start to make up their minds. And I think we're going to find ourselves with it being cemented at one point next week.
Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Brian makes a good point. Tom has had a front row seat to one of these debates. He was on the stage in 2015 when I think while watching that debate, I was watching for the sparring between Stephen Harper and Tom Mulcair. I thought Trudeau was kind of going to be a bit of a sideshow to that one. And in the foreign policy debate in particular, in that one, I thought Trudeau surprised me and did better than I thought he would. And I think a lot of voters, and I don't vote in elections, as you know, Vashi, but I think a lot of voters watched that contest and said, well, that they're going to give Trudeau a try. So I think James makes a very good point. If Poilievre can make an impression to people who aren't sure about him and think maybe he's not ready, then he could close that gap with Mr. Carney. Having said that, it will be very, very hard for Mr. Poilievre to close the gap and then build a lead big enough that he can win a majority government for the Tories. It's going to be very, very tough for him. I just don't see a path to a majority for the Conservatives the way things are set right now. I do see a way they could perhaps win the most seats and win the popular vote, but I don't know about a majority with the NDP and the Bloc being so low.
When Rob references those 2015 debates, Tom, I remember watching them as well. And when he talks about the Trudeau sort of surpassing rather of expectations, it was about expectations. The friend of our show, Corey Tonight, who said if he shows up with pants on, right, like it's going to be a stellar performance.
I remember that remark.
And when he not only wore pants, but also was able to, not fall off the stage, people thought, oh, wait a second, like this is something I can entertain. How important are setting expectations going into this week?
Very important. And you're right to reference the 2015 campaign, because I have a slightly different take from James on that, because Mr. Trudeau had low expectations and they'd been pushed down even further by Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper had asked for and obtained the longest campaign in Canadian history, because his working hypothesis was show Trudeau long enough and people will get to say nice hair, but nothing else. And Trudeau, as you say, well, he's not that bad. I mean, that's a mistake of trying to really push down the other candidate. Mr. Poilievre, just going back 8-10 weeks ago, was riding high in the polls. The landscape changed completely. Mr. Trudeau announced his departure. Mr. Trump was sworn in. Mr. Carney became Liberal leader. And he's had a dickens of a time trying to adjust to that massive change. I'll say perhaps a word, because I do live and work in Quebec mostly. And let me just say a word about the shape of things here. Mr. Poilievre always had trouble breaking through. His numbers were nowhere near what they were in the rest of Canada here in Quebec at any of those moments. And ask anybody who works in our field what's happening with their friends who are, because that's a good chunk of the population, so you wind up having a lot of friends who happen to be sovereignists. They're all saying this is not an election to talk about that. This is an election to have a strong voice. And this is James's point, have one person who can talk for Canada. And in Quebec, that's coalescing around Carney. I mean, there's no two ways about it. They were sending out people early on to try to spin. I remember one guy from, one of Mr. Harper, from Harper's era, going on to Montpel a few weeks ago saying, oh, guy can barely speak French. And you know why? Because he doesn't like Quebec. So they were trying to spin that. Now, Carney's done several turns on French television. His French is fine, thank you. And I had him to the university to talk to a graduate class on environment. Complicated subject. He knew it cold, and he did it in French. And everybody understood every word. So I would say that Quebec and the GTA, and I don't want to hurt, Jim's already been hurt by not talking about the Canucks, but Vancouver is important. But I think that the two real fields where this is going to be determined are the Greater Toronto Area and Quebec. And the sense that I'm getting on the ground is that the swing that we're seeing here in Quebec is going to resemble the orange wave of 2011 that Jack and I pulled off, but this time it's the guy with the orange face who's going to be moving a lot of those votes.
Okay, I gotta leave it on that note. Thanks everyone so much. Our front bench. I apologize. I gotta go to our commercial. Thanks everyone. Back in a moment.